Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to discuss whether or not we can get a bounce off the 50-week SMA. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Remember to check out the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets. Let's go ahead and jump in. So Bitcoin, the valuation of Bitcoin has been bleeding fairly significantly over the last couple of months, okay? And at the bottom here, we've actually gone down about 55 to 56%. Currently, we're down a more modest 52%. Now, we look at this, and you could make the claim that Bitcoin has not had any consequential bounces at this point on the way down. About 2 months ago, when we closed below the 20-week SMA, I said there's a decent chance here that we get a 3 to 6 month bear market at the very least, that it's not necessarily going to be a 3-year phase in the cycle where we wait for new all-time highs, but we could be experiencing some bearish times for 3 to 6 months. Now again, to reiterate, that doesn't mean I think we're going to have a new all-time high when I said that back in May, in 3 to 6 months from May. It just means what I thought, what I considered was what I thought was a likely possibility was that the price of Bitcoin would generally be bearish for 3 to 6 months, meaning it's not going up that significantly. So even at the end of this 6-month period, I wouldn't expect us to necessarily be at new all-time highs. But maybe by that point we could start to try to convincingly find, okay, where is our support? And so far, we've more or less been trending downwards, okay, so far in the first 2 months. In the first 2 months, after going below the 20-week SMA, the valuation has more or less been trending down. Now, again, you could look at this and say, well, technically it's sideways because we've been looking at these other moves. We had these other wicks down to these levels. But also, I think a lot of people might look at this and also come to the conclusion that it looks like a downtrend. I mean, it looks like a downtrend. We're spending more and more time at the prices down in here than we did over here. Okay, these were just daily wicks. Now we're actually having several days closing in this territory. So again, we have not had any consequential bounces in a long time. And therefore, it makes one wonder, well, where could a bounce come from? Okay, where could a bounce come from? And I think the first place to look could be the 50-week simple moving average. The reason I say that is because, well, we've had bounces off the 50-week many times in the past. If you go back to, say, 2014, we had a bounce off the 50-week SMA. And from the 50-week SMA, we went up about 62% or so. In 2018, we had a bounce off of it. And that year, we went up around 45%. And then in 2019, we also sort of had a bounce. I mean, it flirted with that line for a couple of months. And then when we moved back up, we went up about 34%. So we had around a 34% bounce, around a 45% bounce, and then another one around 62%. Now, the current valuation of the 50-week SMA is around $31,869, or just shy of $32,000. So when we look at this, we say, well, I mean, we're already below the 50-week SMA. That's fine. It doesn't mean we can't bounce off of it. I told you again, right? I mean, I said I think we're going to be a generally bearish Bitcoin. Could be lasting the rest of the year, right? It could be lasting the rest of the year if it's the 6 month window. And so I've been generally bearish on Bitcoin for a couple of months now. But I also recognize that occasionally you can have bounces in the market. Now, I would say to reiterate, if we do get a bounce off the 50-week. We can at least see that prior moves did not have us putting in new all-time highs immediately. Okay, I mean, all of these had a bounce, but then they did not actually continue to put in new all-time highs. Remember, though, as I've said many times, every market cycle will be completely different. Just because we didn't hold the 50-week in the past doesn't mean we won't hold it this time. Okay, every cycle will have its own characteristics, and I think we've already seen that play out somewhat significantly. I mean, back in 2013, we didn't even make it to the 50-week SMA. This one was after a much longer move up, and so far this cycle has been, 2 legs, right? We had this leg over here in 2019, and then we had another one in 2020 and 2021. So if we were to go up, say approximately the prior moves, and let's see where that bounce would take us. A 34% move would take us, back up to maybe $44,000. A 45% move would take us up to around $46,000, which is interesting because that's where the 20-week SMA is right now. And a 62% move would take us up to around $52,000 or $53,000. So that gives you an idea of bounces that we've seen in the past. Now, if we do not have a bounce off of the 50-week simple moving average, then I think it just begs the question, well, what are areas below where we currently are that we could maybe find some support at? Remember, the bull market support band is going to act as resistance, and in order for us to resume our bullishness. Okay, so until we're back above that and holding it as support, I wouldn't necessarily go scheduling your Forbes interview, even if we do get a bounce. Okay, so let's imagine we get a bounce and it comes back up. I still wouldn't assume that it's necessarily going to break it on the first attempt. Okay, now some lower prices, some lower areas to look out for, of course. One is probably the 100-week SMA. Okay, and we've seen bounces off of the 100-week SMA before. Here was one back in September 2019 after the 2019 move. From the 100-week SMA, we saw a bounce of around 33%. Now, you might look at this and say, well, where is the 100-week? Well, it's actually at $20,000. So a $20,000 Bitcoin, if we were to come back to $20,000, I can say that in that scenario, I would start to get a lot more bullish, okay? So, back over here, when we first broke through our bull market support band, I was generally bearish because, generally speaking, when Bitcoin breaks below the 20-week SMA, it's not good. I mean, it's not good for the altcoin market, and it's generally not good for Bitcoin. There have been a few fake outs where we go below it and then we're right back above it, but generally speaking, going below the 20-week SMA is not good, and I switched more so to being bearish. And I mean, to some degree, I was already bearish because I was reiterating how we were ahead of schedule from the last market cycle. So at the very least, we need to go sideways. At the very least, we needed to go sideways in order for us to get down below the last cycle's market cycle ROI. Now that we've come back down, I would still say I'm short term or say medium term bearish. Like I still think that Bitcoin has a lot to prove over the next several months and that we're likely not going to see any new all-time highs. But the lower we go, I'll start to get more bullish, okay, more optimistic. Because remember, you wanna act in the reverse of what the market would think, right? So if you're super bearish up here, and then maybe it comes down some, and you're still maybe somewhat bearish, so you're cautious. If it comes down here, then everyone's going to be calling it for it to go even lower, and then that's where you might want to switch to being a little bit more bullish once you see everyone just assuming everything's over and whatnot. So I would say it's sort of like a sliding scale. It's a sliding scale, and I'm getting closer to being neutral than as bearish as I was back over in May, especially when we first dropped below the 20-week SMA. But for now, I would say, obviously there's no guarantee we get a bounce off the 50-week SMA. But I would say whenever we do get a bounce, whether it's off like the 50-week, whether it's off the 100-week, wherever it is, remember that when it comes, the line in the sand will be the 20-week SMA. So when we go back up to it, we will need to try to test it and see if we can get past it, okay? So it could seem that everything's really overly bullish again, and then we could just get rejected back down, and then we have to continue to dig deep to figure out where we will actually find support, build out around there, and then continue back up. If I had to speculate, I would assume that we would need to go sideways at some stage before we can decisively break above the 20-week SMA. I just find it unlikely that we would just not have, a lot of sideways movement. Now, you could look at the last couple of months and say, well, this is sideways. And potentially you're right. And if this is our sideways movement, then what I would say is I would like to see, a couple more months of it at least. Like I would like to see us really spend some time in the 30 to 40K region. I think it's important for the health of the market in order for us to ever have a hope of going to $100,000 that we actually build out some decisive support at levels above $20,000, okay? And so far, I don't really think we've done that. The last time we held the bull market support band as support was at $10,000. I would like to see us either hold it as I would like to see it at 30K. I mean, that would be the most optimistic thing. But in order for us to do that, we need to spend some time. This has got to come back down, and that would sort of be like the a more bullish case. The more bearish case would be if we go to the 20K or something, and then we wrestle with the bull market support band. So those are what I'm looking at. I think that we need to hold it as support. As I said before, I think that for us to hold above 20K as support above the 20-week SMA, you could be looking at the end of the year. You could even be looking at early next year before that happens. So I would say be patient, and let's just continue turning along. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, click the bell icon to turn on your notifications. We do have some Into the Cryptoverse t-shirts, which you can find a link to as well. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you next time.